for the next hour, right, and then the next little bit, that know that that's where I'm coming from. And I want you for a minute to just kind of be okay with that. Is that a deal? That's great. And I'll tell you that my journey to Cornell was really weird. And I'm not going to give you that because we don't have all day, but I'll tell you that I started out working in a sheltered workshop with people with significant cognitive, intellectual, and developmental disabilities. It's important that you know that. I cooked in the kitchen, and I trained people how to cook in the kitchen, and I became a vocational instructor because I like doing that work so much and supporting people. So know that I understand where people with intellectual and developmental disabilities spend time. I've also, that organization, it was an ARC, which are now the ARCs, also has a day treatment component, and I spent a lot of time there as well. So just know that I know that where I'm coming from in terms of my own perspective comes from 20 years of being in places where I spend time with people. Okay, so just know that. And I'm currently, in addition to some of what I'm doing, which is called citizen-centered leadership, I also work, I have a contract with the New York State Office of Mental Health, so I'm in institutions on a regular basis, working with people who've been labeled with psychiatric disabilities, and I'm trying to support the system doing a transformation effort to help people to become integrated in their communities. And I've also done that work in prisons, called inmate citizen. So what is the word you keep hearing pop up? Citizen. Yeah. So before I go any further with that, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to be a citizen? Rights. Lovely. What else? Responsibility. Belong to communities, okay? Are you citizens? And how do you know you're a citizen? How do you know that in your bones? Because we actually take it for granted, don't we? We don't really think about it. Somebody took my course. I teach a course. It's a community of practice. It's an applied learning. It's theory of practice. I say, training is good, but doing is better, right? So let's take what we're talking about and bring it home, literally, right? So one person, an executive director of a day treatment program, took my course, and he said, I've never thought of myself as a citizen before this. I always took it for granted. I did not realize that in my own community I have a right and a responsibility. I just went home, right? Interesting, right? So it's important. So when you think, how do you know you're a citizen? I want you to, in addition to saying, okay, Carol's got some bias, and she's got little quirks, so if I actually say something or show something that's a little offensive, it's not on purpose. I don't know you. I know maybe 2 people in here, maybe 3. I don't know you, okay? So don't take it personally. But I do invite you to think about, I'm looking around, going, everybody here has seen Pinocchio, right? 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 So what's Jiminy Cricket? What really is Jiminy Cricket? The metaphor. And always like, right? So if I say something indirectly or directly, because I'm a little outspoken, and you go, where did she get off saying something like that? Consider that Jiminy Cricket. Okay? It's not me. I do not know you. I am not in your head. I am not here to, on purpose, make anybody uncomfortable. But if you are uncomfortable, there's a chance that it's something I call a pinch point. It's something that you want to go, ooh, let me write that down, and let me think about that later. You can do with it what you want, but do me the favor of saying, if it's brushed slightly the wrong way, that's good. Because it's a spot then that says, in your Jiminy Cricket, I need to think about this a little bit. Something came up, and I have to do a little fuzz. Is that fair? Okay. All right, so here we go. So you look at the title. This is as a right, as a responsibility, and most important, as an expectation. Deidre's story is all about expectation. She would not accept less than what she got for Kate. You see how important that is? And so when we think of citizenship, rights, responsibility, you want to think about that in the context of the services that you either provide people or the services you're asking people to provide people. Fair? Okay. Now hopefully this will work. And I'm really not a techno person, right? So this, as you can tell, it just stops working in my hands, but I'm going to be running between 2 machines. It's like I know what I'm doing. One of them, in my course, it helps to have friends, right? So I don't like to do this stuff by myself. In the course that I teach and developed, it really was developed based on a series of interviews from the real experts in the field, the people who invented person-centered planning and community inclusion. And I'm going to share with you, God willing and the creek don't rise, right? A couple of video clips that are part of that course. And so when you see me like moving to machines and doing things, I'm just going to say, be patient, and then we hope they don't buffer, and you get a real chance to meet John O'Brien and Beth Mount and Denise Pistonet. If you've never met these people, this is a nice way to do that, and it helps you. You have no idea there's 125 people in the room. It's pretty intimidating, right? To be me. So it's helpful to have people kind of support me. But before we go there, let's do this. Come on, let's do this. I said, let's do this.
What machine are you doing?
This should be over here.
Right, that's what it is.
Let's do this.
All right.
Now I do my little prayer with
That was an example of a partnership. I guess today you didn't do that. Wait, you did that.
Yeah. Do you see that? Do you see this? It's not great, but it's all right. You don't have the pictures in your phones. Most of them are right? Who are they? Get those all poisons. You won't know this. But what can we say? Any of us. Either we have children or we want to have children, right? Or we know children, right? We like children, or children are part of our, my goodness, look where we are, right? And look, we're here with this early childhood thing. So here, I'm going to assume y'all like kids, or at least some kids, right? And I just want to say having raised two girls. Some of what you're describing has nothing to do with this movie. That is girls. We'll talk at lunch, right? What can we say with a great deal of certainty that most parents, want for their kids? What do you want for your children? Happiness. So define happiness. What does happiness really mean? What do you want? What do you wish? What's happiness? Sorry? Fulfillment. Content. Doing what they love. What else? Huh? Friends. Ooh, love it. What else? Sorry? The best health. Right? Anything else? Opportunity. Yeah. Keep going. Feeling safe. Feeling safe. Proud of who you are. What are you describing, right? We want that for our kids. We want that for us. This is really about humanity, right? But with kids, we wish that for them. We will do anything in our power that we can, right? To help make that happen. Is that right? Yeah. Because if you just said, nah, forget about it, I'd be like, I gotta go. The kids on the left are mine. Are they not just the cutest little girls ever? Right? I mean, really. But Jennifer's on the left, Justin's on the right. I was here for half a day to hear their stories. And it's an important story, but not as important as the little guy on the right. That's Chris. His name's Chris Boyd. I met Chris when he was that age. I met him at an ARC recreation program. I used to do that, you know. I mean, I worked in the workshop, helping people, you know, learn how to cook, right? But I also, because I worked for the ARC, and this was several years ago, I needed a part-time job just so I could pay the rent, right? Because when you are the assistant food service specialist, I make $9,000 a year. So I also worked in the rec program. That's where I met Chris for the first time. He's adorable. He's a little handful. So, you know, Chris has multiple disabilities, including hearing loss. His cognitive disabilities, they couldn't figure out if he had an IQ, is what they told us. Right? Physical disabilities and a few other things. But Chris is, you know, kind of an awesome guy. And I knew him in summer camp, but then I sort of lost track of him because the work that I did was mostly with adults, you know. But his mom was on our board, so I would meet Chris here and there along the way. There we go. So our dreams for our children, right? So I just wanted you to meet Chris because I want you to hold Kate, her story, in your heart right now. And I want you to think about Chris. And I want you to think about some child you love very much. And And I want your heart to be here with me for the next few minutes, okay? I want them in your heart, and I want them to fill this room. Because it's really important that we remember that this work is not about programs. This work is not about, what can I get? This work is about the people we hold in our hearts. All right? Are you guys doing all right so far? Am I doing all right so far? This is what we want, right? You said, friends. You said that they feel good about what they do, that they love what they're doing, that they have a sense of fulfillment and purpose, right? Right? They want all those things. And so this is what everybody wants. See, I can do it up in advance. We want our kids to be healthy. We want to make sure that they're happy. We want to know that they're safe, right? And we want to we need to know that there are people in their lives who love them. And for me, probably for you, probably younger ones, you haven't thought about this yet, but for the over 50s, what happens when I'm not here? I need to know there are people in my child's life who love them past me and will hold their story, right? That's really, really important, yeah? So hang on to that, and then they have purpose and meaning. So y'all got the right answers, and unless you looked ahead in your folders, right, which you could have done, but I'm pretty sure that we are right on the same page. We're talking about well-being. Let's just put it in that container. Call it well-being. Are you okay with that? And now when I say well-being, you know what I'm talking about? Okay. So here's the thing. The way we get well-being in our lives as human beings, are the people we quality relationships. So that's where we get our strength. When the chips are down, when we don't know where to go. If we have good friends, right? Good family, good neighbors, that's where we go. So well-being relies on, it depends upon, you must have people in your life that are part of a quality relationship. You must have. And now this is the most important thing that I can probably say all day. Because it's the whole notion that you all said, people need a sense of belonging, don't we? It's Maslow. That's easy peasy. Maslow. Belonging is relative. Because here's a really important, this is the part where you get to hear Carol's bias on community. Belonging is something we decide for people with significant disabilities. We decide where they belong. Belonging is something that people who support people with disabilities decide where they belong. Are you with me on that? That's really vital. This is a pivotal point. We decide, professionals decide, right? Where people with significant disabilities belong. Belonging matters. So, belonging is essential to well-being. Our roles are defined by the interactions we have with people and places within them. When you introduce yourself to me, what do you say? And hi, how are you? I'm from, and I am on, right? And what do you do? What do you do for fun? Like to go to movies, walk in the park. What are you proud of when it comes to yourself? I am independent, okay? Now, I'm not going to ask you to answer this, but if I were to say to you, so what are you not any good at? I'm not going to tell you that, right? So when you think about people who are labeled with disabilities, how do we know that? Often, especially in the professional realm. And as parents learn early on, that's how we get access to services is how. Labels. So, again, remember, labels matter because we need the funding. Please do not hear that I don't think services and programs are important because that would be wrong. I believe they're important, but I believe they're leverage points. I don't believe that they are what we want. I believe they're what we need to get what we want. See the difference? All right, so that's really important because our roles matter. My friend Judith Snow, who, if you ever have the opportunity, would be should be in your bucket list. She says most people who are labeled are usually in places that are all about disability. And disability does not reflect anybody's dream. How many of you woke up this morning and said, dang, I hope I have a stroke today? Right? Disability does not reflect anybody's dream. So, People First in Canada, just put this out. I just got this like a week ago. It's a coalition over there in Canada. And we have it here. We have People First, right? But this group came together and they're talking about the right to live in community. And they define institution because that can be kind of a slippery slope. We can easily see institutions are those big buildings, right, where people got housed. But thank gosh we had deinstitutionalization, so there are no more institutions. They say, maybe not so much. An institution is any place in which people who have been labeled as having an intellectual disability are isolated, segregated, and or congregated. An institution is any place in which people do not have or are not allowed to have exercise control over their lives and their day-to-day decisions. We tell people where they belong. An institution is not defined merely by its size. We can have, Michael Kendrick is this really sarcastic guy in the field, talks about person-centered institutions for learning. Says that sometimes the planning we do with people actually creates a container called person-centered, but keeps people exactly where they are. It's kind of interesting. So as I think about early intervention and what parents, you guys that are here, and you go, well, my kids are really young, why does this matter now? Listen to Kate's story. If we don't talk and think about this concept of citizenship and belonging now, you're going to be on this funny little road where professionals tell you, here's how we do it. And because your parents who say, oh, I never had a kid with a disability before, so you must know, you might say, okay. And it isn't until for a lot of the moms that I know, and the dads that I know, it isn't until somewhere down the road they go, wait a minute, what happened? And so it's vital to say, hold your heart. Keep your heart in place. What do I want for my son, my daughter? What am I willing to accept and what am I not willing to accept when it comes to where they belong? You with me? You okay? Okay. So that's important. When we justify that some people belong in segregated settings, they're better off. The community's not ready for them, right? Nobody would be able to support this person. They need to have, right? When we justify that people belong in segregated settings, we create the acceptance in our mind and in our communities, in our hearts, that that's the right place for people. It may be for some people, but when we have a global belief that that's where people belong, we create the conditions in our culture that says that's where people belong. Does that make sense? The only reason I keep asking that is I did something not too long ago when people said they couldn't get their heads around what I was trying to convey. And so I've actually so here's Chris. Ever read about Chris? As Chris was growing up, he kept getting put in segregated classrooms. Chris was behavior problem. I like to say Chris had expressive communication skills. And when you did not do what Chris needed or wanted, he totally let you know that, and he'd let you know it in stages. It started out with a set of keys. And if you didn't pay any attention to that set of keys very often, you were wearing them upside your head, right? And so Chris, in that least restricted environment sort of notion, ended up with a one-on-one aid in contained classroom because he had a behavioral problem. They couldn't figure out what his IQ was, right? And so that was the least restricted setting because they said that's the best. And so Chris had to eat lunch in the room, right? He couldn't go downstairs where all the other kids were because they were afraid that he might go off, right? Chris stayed in the segregated setting. One of the things that's really interesting about Chris, and we knew it for a long time, is he hated to be around other people with disabilities, particularly those with behavioral issues. So he's in this contained setting with who? With a one-on-one aide who doesn't necessarily like Chris as much as some of us. Because he's adorable, right? He's a little imp. He's got a great sense of humor, right? He's got a stubborn streak. He knows what he wants, right? He may not have the repertoire telling you how to get it, but he knows what he wants and what he doesn't want. And it really takes creative listening. You have to listen with what Beth Knott would call the eyes and the ears of the heart. You have to be with Chris, right? So Chris had this contained setting. He couldn't go down for lunch to go to breaks. And in that, they had decided for Chris, I'm serious, and here's how I know this. I re-entered Chris's life when I created a transition program where I come from. I developed with with the school district, a school to work transition program that had as a goal community inclusion. Students will leave with paid employment of at least a part-time nature and connected to community membership through associational life, right? They'll belong someplace, they'll be members of something, and they'll know where they want to live, things like that. So that was what the goal of that was. That's where I met Chris. And his papers for his schooling, right, his IEP, right, you know what that is, right? His IEP so that Chris would be going to the day treatment program, because that's where he belonged. Because of his IQ, his behavior, he had to have some nursing services, right? He was legally deaf. That's the best place for him. His mom, kind of like Deirdre, said, but she didn't know what to do. She didn't really, she was like, think about all the stuff you got to do, but this is really where Chris belongs. And because they felt he belonged in a day treatment program, his activities in his segregated classroom were to get him ready for that. Anybody been in a day treatment program, at least where I was working? What do you do there? Color. Huh? They get babysat. There's a lot of ADL. Y'all know what ADL is? Activities of daily living. So Chris had to learn how to wash his hands correctly. Chris had to learn how to brush his teeth, how to get along with others, and he would stuff envelopes because they were getting him ready, because maybe one day he'd be able to go to the workshop. Now, I worked in a workshop. I was actually doing this transition program from a workshop. I go, we don't stuff envelopes, right? That's not what we do at the workshop. Why is Chris doing this? Lou Brown, one of the leaders in inclusive education, says, don't teach my kid dumb stuff. Don't teach my kid dumb stuff. Where in the world is Chris going to go stuff envelopes? Unless he's working with a political campaign, and even now it's not even appropriate, right? Right? So, but when we think about this, Chris was really on the edge. Are you with me? Because Chris's life was in the balance. The professionals, the system, the structures, all because of where people really felt with all the goodness of their heart. These are not bad people at all. They really believed for Chris to be successful, that's where he needed to be. They just knew that in their heart. So please hear that. They're really good people. Really good people. So it's what I call the collateral damage of good intentions. They really meant it. They really believed it. But what happens when we put people in places like Chris was headed, and places in school where it was, John O'Brien is the world leader in person-centered thinking. Nobody better. And the book that you have there in front of you is a gift from Wendy, this group here. And I thank you very, very much for getting that out there. He talks about what happens when people are excluded from the mainstream of our society. So there's a kind of poverty that happens. And so I think I'd like to introduce you to John right now. Again, God willing. And if we go right, this means this. Teach space. Don't go on a break. Okay, so this is John O'Brien. Hopefully you'll be able to hear when you run up. This is it. It's only a couple minutes, not even. Again, this guy's the bomb. This guy knows stuff. He talks about the poverty that is created when people are excluded from or segregated in, right? Excluded from mainstream society.
There's three kinds of poverty. There's not enough money, but there's also not enough friends and not enough money. And obviously, those three things don't necessarily go together. Some people that don't have much money got lots of people and lots of things to do that are meaningful for them. It's people who are controlled by services who are likely to lose all three. Lots of the isolation that occurs in the lives of many people with disabilities occurs at considerable expense in public money. And so there are lots of our practices that need reflection and redefinition if we're going to overcome both poverty and isolation. And they feed on each other, obviously. Robert Putnam, the researcher who's defined what he calls social capital, says the well-connected are far more likely to be hired, housed, healthy, and happy. And so things that we do that keep people from developing social relationships in which they contribute and in which they play a valued role undermine the chances that people will find their way into greater meaning, into more friendships, less isolation, and for that matter, into greater real wealth.
Three kinds of pop, certainly money, not enough friends, not enough meaning. What do you want for your kids? Remember when we started? What is it? Purpose. Want to do what they love.
They need applause for that.
So that's not right. Three kinds of love. So how many of us do this kind of experience in our dream for our kids? Not enough money, not enough friends, not enough meaning. That's not what you all said. But he said, what he was saying is, you know, when we exclude people, that's what the potential, the likelihood of that happening in the lives of people who rely solely on segregated services, that's likely to happen. So how does this happen? How do we get into our head that says that's the kind of place where people belong? Right? Where did that come from? And again, it's not bad people saying bad things. It's nothing about negative, right? It's not about people saying, oh, that's what I want to do, let's just put people away. Right? I mean, we say that for some people, but not for our people. Right? So when we think about what do you call it, standardized assessment, anybody go through one of them tests? Love their story, right? Because the standardized assessments are rough for kids who learn differently. My youngest daughter that you met, that beautiful child who is now 19 years old, doesn't learn the very same way other people learn. She's just not academic. So guess what happens in school? Like that child struggles and cries and carries on. Fortunately, we got out of high school, right? And now she's on her own little pathway, which is great. I'd love to tell you that story. But here's the thing. Our education system, and no offense to any educator, because it is not you. It's really what's been happening out there is, you know, like no child left behind. We're going to have everybody meet this. And so now we're teaching a test, right? And so there's this notion, except in some very rare schools, where the standardized testing, everybody gets one, right? And I don't know if you can read this, but it says, you know, so it's the educational system says for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Right? So you got an elephant, you got a monkey, you got a penguin, right? You got a goldfish in a bowl, you got a donkey and a seal. Albert Einstein says everyone is a genius. But if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. If we hold people with intellectual disabilities up to the same kind of thinking, right, that has gotten us here in the first place, we're in trouble. They can't do it. What did he just say? We realized we were asking her to do something that was too much. We were asking her to keep up with that standard, when in fact what she needed was her own space where she could blossom. It's not stupid. She's a genius. She needed a place to be able to let her geniosity show up. Where does he belong? And when they were telling us that Chris needed to go to a day treatment center, his mom said, I'd really rather not have that happen. As a matter of fact, you know, she was very staunch in her community, big church member and stuff, and Chris went everywhere with her, and people loved him. It's real hard not to like Chris, unless he doesn't like you, and then it's a lot. But he only doesn't like you if you're not respecting him, if you don't take the time to listen. Chris is actually a person with great spirit and great soul. One of his greatest gifts is that of being a host and welcoming people. He has the gift of hospitality like nobody ever met. Right? Cool. Right? So, this is awesome. So let's see. How does it happen? Where we put our attention matters. Where we spend our money matters. So I challenged my own, back in the day when I was working with the ARC, and I worked for a really great place, and I still do. I still do consulting with them. I'm married to somebody who works there. He's the director of one of the programs. So I go, but let's look. If what we're looking at when we're spending resources, and resources mean time, money, person power, creativity, space, right? Any of those things. If what we're doing in these places is focusing on the disability and putting our resources in that, then everything we do reinforces the disability. And again, it's the collateral damage of good intentions. Let's get her over this. If Chris could only behave. See, if we could do behavior with Chris, Chris had a behavior modification plan, right? He had his washing his hands right plan, all the things that although Chris was a pretty good hand washer, I don't understand, but that's what he did. It's ADL, okay. So it's like when we focus, limited resources, and we're not getting more of them anytime soon, probably never, right? Make do, right? Do more with less. Well, as they get shrunk, I'm thinking we better be darn well sure how we're using our limited, precious resources. And it's not just money, it's the talent of the staff, it's the creativity in our programs, right? It's the innovation, but where we focus matters. When all we're focusing on is disability, there is no room for that citizenship to show up. Because we really will tell ourselves, until they take care of this business of being disabled, flapping their hands and doing whatever they're doing, no one in the community will like them. They don't belong until they stop being who they are. That's kind of what we say, right? That's scary business for me. Look at this sweet little girl. She says, my teacher told my mommy that I would never be able to follow directions or follow a routine. My mommy got me a new teacher. That took care of that. The majority of planning that we do with people. Now, I want to talk for just a second. Plans. ISPs, IEPs. There's a self-advocate in the state of Vermont. Her name's Carol. It's not me. But she says, I went to school and I got an IEP, Individualized Education Program. And then when I was getting out of school, I had a preliminary individualized service plan called a PISP. Some of you may remember those. And then I got out of school, I got an ISP. And then I wanted to go to employment. I wanted to go to work. And at that time, it was vested. Now it's access to God. I got an IEP. She said, I quit the system. I go, why, Carol? She's not sick of being people. I was like, that's pretty funny, Carol. She said, yeah, because I went through all this thing. Here's the interesting thing. Judith Snow says that the majority of planning we do with people in the name of individualized or person-centered, we can interchange those words, really is about what we already know or believe the person is capable of doing. We will write goals based on what we know we can do, or that they can do. Do you see what I mean? We will write it because we know they can. She says that's not person-centered planning, that's planning-centered planning. We already know the answer. Person-centered planning is when we don't know the outcome. We don't know. All we know is we want to help this person to find who she is, so she has purpose, meaning, belonging, friends. People that take care of her, people who love her, people who will keep her safe because of those things. Buildings don't keep people safe. People keep people safe. Relationships keep people safe. And here's one of the things, right? Who am I? This is one of the ways in which planning can really happen. This is what we did with Chris. We sat in his house, we brought some of his teachers, we brought some of the people who care about him, his friends, his neighbors, members of his congregation. This is not Chris's plan. We did something like this. We said, who is Chris? Who's this guy? And interestingly enough, what didn't show up were all of the things on his plan, right? All of the things in his file. I mean, those are there. Mind you, Chris is a person with significant disabilities, and if we were to pretend they weren't there, that would be negligent. That would be irresponsible. That would be dumb, right? But it's not who Chris is, you see, and that's what was happening. Chris was being defined by the labels, and nobody knew who Chris was. That's the support Chris needs. Those are impairments. And in the social model of disability, it goes like this. An impairment is only an impairment. If you get the assistance you need to address the impairment, disability is irrelevant. Impairment turns into disability when the support that a person needs is not there for them. Then they can't do something. That's when it becomes a disability. Impairment is something, right, that we can deal with. When you get the right amount of support and assistance, Kate has a job. She has a job coach assistant. So if she's not disabled right in that job, she has an impairment that needs assistance, which she's getting, which allows her to be not a client, not a consumer, an employee. What a difference, right? Hi, I'm Kate. I work at, right? Where does Kate belong? So we want to know the gifts and the capacity. Who is the person? So this comes from Harley Davidson. When writing the story of your life, don't let anyone else hold the pen. That's what happens. So moms, dads, it's really important. Service providers, this is all of us, right? And the only people I will let hold the pen are people that I know are incredible graphic recorders who are listening to you through their pen so that your life story comes out, your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations, your sense of identity, where you belong. So what if instead of disability was the focus, right? What if it was around those concepts of citizenship? And I just use the word citizenship to capture all that well-being, all the things you talk about. What if we said our time, our money, our energy needs to be spent getting to know who this person is, finding out their gifts, their capacities, their potential. Because remember you said right at the beginning, citizenship carries with it rights and responsibilities. Beth Knott's going to talk a little bit about that for us in a minute. But the point of it is if you belong in our community, you show up, you pay your taxes, right? Right? It's a responsibility. It's part of citizenship. It's a contribution to the well-being, right? But how many of you volunteer someplace? Yeah. That's a contribution, right? You have gifts, you have capacity. It makes your heart sing. You don't do it for the pay, you do it because it makes your soul feel good, right? Right? So that's also an expectation of citizenship is you give back. And if you're not hard on, right? If the expectation, people with significant disabilities are excused from that expectation, and we think we're doing them a favor. When in fact, when I die, and my daughter doesn't have people who love her in her life, really? If we're going to be honest, staff people come and go. You know? I mean, right? And maybe they aren't going to like her as much as somebody else. Chris didn't have staff people in his life all the time who loved him, or liked him, or even respected him. Right? That can happen. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is if we're spending precious little time with people, that we're using those resources the best way we possibly can. So if we're focusing on the concept of citizenship, then there's less room for disability and more about how to use these resources that are leveraged to address the impairment, to give the assistance to the impairment so this person could be a contributing member as a citizen in our communities like everybody else. Right? So the sad thing is Chris contracted cancer, very rare cancer at the age of 30. And he died on April 2nd, 2009. I might get that to This is his obituary, or bits of it. Christopher, 31 of Brunswick, passed away at home, surrounded by family and friends. I went to be with the Lord to become the master conductor. Chris has a love of gospel music, particularly Handel's Messiah. I know this for good reason, right? In my car, I'm going to be conducting, right? He was a graduate of Troy High School, class of 97. He was an employee at Stewart's in Brunswick, and I will tell you, I was his job coach. He held several different jobs, but at the time of his death, he was working there. He's an active member and servant at the Brunswick Church. Actually, Chris volunteered there. He'd greet people on the way into church services on Sunday. I told you, he's got this gift of hospitality like nobody's business. But we also got, and he volunteered there. He was holding programs to give out. But we also got him a job there. And he was so valued and appreciated in his church that they actually rose into the rank of assistant sexton. And his name appeared on their letter. Everything that went out is Mr. Boyd's assistant sexton. He had a pretty serious role there, right? In addition to that, Chris had membership in the horseback program at the Equine Development Growth Experience. He loved horses, loved powerlifting. So it talks about that. He was a member of Cutting Edge Sports. He also competed his horseback riding in powerlifting in Special Olympics for powerlifting. He played basketball. He was an incredible runner. He did great stuff in track and field. And he was, at one point, the athlete of the week. Chris's favorite activities were attending Joni and Friends family rapid retreats in Pennsylvania someplace, right? So this is a condensed version because it's a PowerPoint. Chris was a son. Chris was a question. These are his buds at the powerlifting place. Chris was real good at it. Won several awards. Chris, before his death, couldn't walk. The cancer ate his bones, and so he couldn't walk, and he had to use a wheelchair. And those 2 months, lifted him up in that wheelchair and brought him not only to the gym but to church service, so that Chris could be part of that. The other thing that happened is his riding teacher, when Chris couldn't leave the house anymore, brought the horse over. His horse named Little Guy. Brought him over, and they opened up all the windows, and Little Guy could put his head in the window in this little tiny slip of land in Detroit, New York. So Chris would say goodbye to Little Guy, and Little Guy would say goodbye to him. Here's Chris conducting the Hand of the Messiah. Chris was ever hospitable. And here's Chris in his bed. I actually volunteered while Chris was in his last few months because I wanted to, not because I needed to. I mean, I needed to, right? So I'd bring my work over, whatever, and I'd say to his mom, I got a shift, because he had to have 24-hour coverage. I have to tell you that hospice was there, but for the most part, 75% of Chris's coverage was by people who wanted to be there, family and friends. Chris needed a seat rub incessantly, and that's when one of his folks was there, giving Chris the foot rub. You just open up the sheet and feet, right? They go rub. People with disability have relationships with people not instead of, but other than paid providers. 75% of us were volunteers who loved Chris, and we wanted to be with him in his last days. We're talking about citizenship. Remember Chris in the segregated classroom, where he longed, and when he was going to a day treatment program? Chris went to a day treatment program, I'm here to tell you, and it went like this. He took the van to the day treatment program because it was a Medicaid-funded service. Cha-ching. When he got to the day treatment program, he went to see the nurse, also a funded service. Cha-ching. But after 10 minutes, and he got his medicine, and he got his, he needed a lot of structure. He needed to know what was going on today. So after he got that taken care of with his service coordinator there, cha-ching, he met his job coach, where they went out to work. Different line of funding. Cha-ching. When he went to his recreation programs or when he, his community inclusion programs, they were absolutely funded. He went to a day treatment program, but his resources were used for Chris to get a life. And so when Chris died, the church was packed to the gills. And interesting, Chris's passion and love, his Achilles heel is Reese's peanut butter cups. And it was interesting because it's what everybody showed up with. Of course, there were some there, and the priest, when he was doing communion, instead of using the Holy he had a Mondo Reese's cup, and he broke pieces of that up for all of us to enjoy. Lovely. That's citizenship, right? Now, here's Beth now, and so these are people who I've been, influenced why I talk like I talk, right? Beth is absolutely one of the key people I met her years and years ago, probably around the time I met Wendy. And so I would like to introduce you to her at this point. Oh, and I just look at my notes. Please.
And there are three ideals that, to me, shape every element of person-centered thinking and action that I engage in. The first is that all people are created equal. So the Great Fathers intended that that means that everyone has a higher purpose that they are entitled to reach for. And no one is left out of that. So people with disabilities are equally entitled to reach for a higher purpose. The second is that is equal opportunity. That in order to reach for one's higher purpose, you need to have equal opportunities to do so. And so our work related to person-centered planning requires creating opportunities for people with disabilities that exist for everyone else in society. And the third ideal is that our work as citizens is to also give back, not just reach for our higher purpose or our higher self, but to do so in a way that we contribute back to the greater good and which strengthens society and culture for us all.
What else? Equal opportunity. All people are created equal, meaning everyone is born with higher purpose. That's what she's talking about. Everybody, no one is left out of that equation. Everyone is born with purpose. Equal access to opportunity to reach for that purpose. When Chris's gift of hospitality showed up, and we realized in a day treatment program, when he tried to offer his gift, it had no place to hang its hat. It just didn't belong there. And so when we say that Chris belongs here, but his gift doesn't, the thing is when we discovered all of Chris's gifts, the problem it created for us as staff people was what to do with them with integrity. Right? Because once you understand what somebody's higher purpose and their gift is, and you don't do something with it, you got to sleep with that. Right? Because we make all kinds of excuses why Chris shouldn't belong where he belongs. And I'm like, sorry, man, this guy's got too much to give away. He's got offerings that the world needs. Everyone has a responsibility to give that to the community. There is a reason there was standing room only in the church, and it wasn't because people felt sorry for Connie or for Chris. People loved Chris. He touched lots of lives because of his gift of hospitality and the places that he was able to find to offer. Does that make sense? The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose in life is to give it away. Right? No one is left out of that equation. No one should be left out of that expectation. If you can work, work. Offer, offer. Member, member. Where do people belong? So my creative friend of mine says you're a citizen where you are defined by what you contribute, not by what you consume. For service providers in the room, what do we call people who do services? Sorry? I'm sorry. Individuals, what else? What do other people? Consumers. Right, that's the general, right? So, yeah, good programs and such don't do that, but in general, if you were to talk in New York State, you'll say, we call people who use services consumers. What does it mean to consume? Eat, to use up. We're in there, and that consumption is the give back. Oh, be careful what we wish for, right? I don't want my daughter to be a consumer. I mean, she can go buy stuff if she's got money and free ideas about where, like self-determination, where to use it. If she has money, remember what John O'Brien said about poverty. When you're a person with significant disabilities, do you get to control your money? No. So it's really important that we know that. And it doesn't mean, again, I'm not saying that we don't want to use services. We absolutely do. But we want the services to be in service to this whole notion of citizenship, contribution, higher purpose, giving back. often, making relationships. So I am going to introduce you to Denise Bissonette, who I swear to you, when you meet this woman, even on screen, you almost could love her. You can feel her. So let me do this. Oh, let me find her first here. Excuse me. We're almost done. You guys are doing a great job. You know, a little over. Denise. So this is in my course, just so you know. I think it's this way. Over here. Like this. Fly back. Bring the knees down just a little bit. Denise Bissonette is just an amazing woman, mostly concerned with non-traditional approaches to helping people find employment.
Well, I think that older generations of people who have disabilities grew up at a time where we had kind of a patronizing view. It wasn't necessarily like bigotry or prejudice, we don't want you playing, it's just that like we're going to take care of you. And I think that when you're a child, been raised without the expectation that you will participate, that it wasn't something that as they became adults, that maybe they ever questioned. I'm so happy that children with disabilities are not raised in that world anymore, because we see that, number one, we need the gifts they have to bring, and number two, it is their birthright to be able to play that part.
She said, hold that thought, because she'd like to connect the thought to the next one. That's what she said.
The health and the wholeness and the vitality of any community requires 100% participation of every member of that community. And that, to me, is what citizenship is about. We have a right as a citizen of a community to share our gifts. But what I also love about the term citizen and citizenship is that it also carries the concept of responsibility. You have come with medicine the world greatly needs, which is sometimes a message people with disabilities haven't heard much. It's all about what can we do for you? What do you need from us? I like the idea of turning the table. What do you have to give? Where are you going to give it?
So, you should see my office. So, kind of like the last but not least sort of thing. So, thinking about what we've been talking about to this point, and what Denise just kind of put so beautiful, thinking about that. So, John O'Brien, these are some of the world-class leaders, right? Poverty. There are 3 kinds of poverty when people are left out of the community. Not enough money, not enough friends, not enough meaning. Not what we signed up for when we became parents, nor is it what we signed up for when we got into the field of service. I'm sure. I know that's not the vortex that sucked me in. You know, it was really about capacity, possibility. That says that there are, 3 elements of citizenship. That all people are born equal, meaning that everybody is born with purpose, higher purpose. And that we have a right to reach for that higher purpose, and not only that, we have a responsibility to give back, just the very same way you guys are defining citizenship this morning. And then Denise says, everybody has a right and responsibility. They have medicine that the world greatly needs. I'm going to ask you a question to take with you. What are our communities missing when the person who's in your heart right now isn't there? What's missing in our community? That person isn't part of it. What do we deny ourselves for the good of the whole, right? Think on that. And then leveraging our resources, right? Leveraging the resources. I swear to you, we as providers are smart, we are kind, and we are important. But we're also creative. I know for the most part that we approach one another in a service delivery realm and say, help me figure this out. This is what I want for my daughter. You know how to be creative. You know what's available. You know what the services are. That's your expertise. Let's leverage that because I know my kid and I know her gifts and her capacities. And I know who she needs to be in the world and she knows that too. And I need you to help us to help her get it. Use the money that way. And believe you what, I'll tell you what, there is this interesting belief that communities are not ready for people with significant disabilities, and it's a lie. You are a community. We are a community. Communities are ready. When people show up with